everybody. Today we're going to be doing some notes on positive and negative shapes. So on a piece of paper, this can be in your sketchbook or it can be just a spare sheet, just somewhere that you have to write this down because you don't want to forget it. Go ahead and at the top write positive and negative shapes. All right, so positive and negative shapes are important because one, we're going to be using them in our next big project. And two, sometimes whenever you're trying to space things correctly from one another, negative shape is what you really want to be looking at. This is especially important for things that are close to one another in a drawing, but don't exactly touch. You'll see how that works in a minute. But a lot of the times you'll draw both objects really, really well, but you'll draw them too far apart or too close together. And what you're going to be looking at in order to make sure that they're about spaced correctly is the negative shape between them. So let's talk about what that shape actually is. Other things you're going to need for this today: 2 pieces of colored paper, just makes everything easier to see, a pair of scissors, a little bit of glue, and something to write or draw with. I'm probably going to be using the big Sharpie because y'all will have that easier time seeing it. All right, so we're going to start this pretty easy. I'm going to take one of my pieces of colored paper and I'm going to draw myself a guide. If you feel like you trust yourself, then maybe you don't need to do this, but I'm going to draw myself a little box. Just a simple shape. You could do a circle, triangle, square, rectangle, whatever. I'm doing rectangle. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it out. Remember, whenever you're cutting, turn the paper, not the scissors. Scissors should always point away from you. It's okay if I don't cut exactly on my line. That's the fabulous thing about this particular thing, is I can glue it this side down. All right, so first thing I'm going to glue down is actually this. I cut out this shape, but I'm going to glue down this piece first. So I'm going to come over here, dot, dot, not a lot is all they say. We're good. All right, so general rules when gluing. If you're going to do a line the way I do, make sure that line is skinny. Do not go for fat lines. If you do dots, that is okay too. Get near your corners. You don't have to get all the way to them. But if you have any really thick lines of glue, they will show up on the front side when you glue this down. 2, gently lay things down before you smash them down. You got to make sure they're in the right place. Then press. Bam. Magical. Now glue's not leaking everywhere. We're all good. I'm going to do the same thing to this piece right here. Remember, I don't want any of my lines showing, so I'm going to put it down this way. Yep. Again, when gluing, you can do the dots. If you're doing dots, just do a few near your edges and make sure you're near the corners. Not a lot of glue. Glue goes a long way. And go ahead and press that down. You now have 2 shapes here. One of them is positive, one of them is negative. You tend to think of the shape that you're drawing as the positive one. It's the thing on top of the background, and in the case of this particular set of things, it's this one right here. This is the positive shape. Over here, this one is therefore the negative shape. It's the shape of the background. I've also had a friend describe it to me as the shape of a hole. I like both those descriptions pretty well. All right, so negative shape, positive shape. Some other fun things to know about the shape that we used right here. This is also a simple shape. A simple shape does not have many if any holes, gaps, or details. You can think of this as your squares, rectangles, solid blocks. Simple shapes don't have a lot of information. They're very basic. They're very plain. Circles, triangles, octagons, hexagons, they're all very simple shapes. They're so simple that we have just named them under general categories. All right, this one, by virtue of being a simple shape, in this case, it is also a closed shape. These are not quite synonymous, but they are very similar. Basically, a closed shape is solid. It's not going to have a lot of holes or gaps or spaces in it. You see that this looks like one solid shape, therefore it is a closed shape. In this particular case, to do a quick review, this one also happens to be a rectangle, which is a geometric shape. A geometric shape has regular edges that can be defined mathematically. In short, I could find the area of this with a regular, normal equation. All right, so positive, negative shapes. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so I ran out of room on that paper, so I'm continuing on my next paper, or you might have a next page. If you still have room, you might can do this on your paper, on what you have left of your paper. So positive and negative shapes continued. Now I'm gonna take my other sheet of paper. We're still gonna make a positive and negative shape, only this shape is gonna be very different from my last shape. My last shape was a very regular, simple shape. Now I'm gonna do one that looks a little bit more wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey wibbly. It's gonna kind of go everywhere. Like this is spilt milk, my guys. It's gonna look crazy. Again, when you're cutting, make sure that you're turning the paper, not the scissors. It's okay if you're not quite on your lines for this one. We're looking slightly for speed. And as I did on my previous guy, I can just flip this upside down so that my lines aren't showing and it's not gonna really be any different. All right, so here I have them glued down. I have them labeled. This is my negative shape, i.e. the shape of the background or the shape of a hole. And this one is my positive shape. But here's where the differences between this positive and negative and this positive and negative are. This one is a simple shape. The opposite of that is a complex shape. Again, you're going to want to know what that is for our next project here in class. But in general, what you want to know about complex shapes is that they are almost always more interesting than simple shapes, meaning they're much more useful for your artworks because complex shapes will draw the eye and they will make your artworks, by sheer force of them being there, more interesting to look at, and therefore your grade goes up. So a complex shape does have holes, gaps, or details. If you want to know what I mean by a hole or a gap or a detail, a hole would be like if this had a little hole in it. These are gaps right here where the shape itself takes up about this much space, but that positive shape does not take up the whole of that space. And other details like these curves and whatnot. There's just stuff to it. That also, by definition, makes this an open shape. An open shape has holes. That's it. It has holes or gaps. If you want to know how I'm defining a hole or a gap, I want you to think about this box right here that goes all the way to this edge, all the way to this top, all the way down. If I were to draw a perfect rectangle that this just perfectly fits in, all of this space that is negative space around our positive shape, that is the gap, that is the hole. If you did the same thing on our rectangle here, it perfectly fits our little rectangle. And even if we cut in closer on this guy, where we scooped out and just had his outermost points for the most part, there's still lots of little areas that he doesn't quite fill in. So that gives us that openness, almost like Swiss cheese. All right, again, we want to do a quick review here. These particular shapes right here are organic shapes. It is irregular, and not defined mathematically. I would need to do some pretty crazy calculus, and I'm not joking, it's calculus, to find like the areas under or around curves in order to figure out the area of this guy. I can't just break him up into very simple shapes and add them together. He's a little bit more than that. So that makes this an organic shape. You're an organic shape. Most things in your life are organic shapes. Anything in nature is an organic shape. Meanwhile, man-made things are those more geometric, rectangular, perfect shapes that can be found a little bit more mathematically. Anyway, that's your notes on positive and negative shape. So once you have these notes completed, then at least in our class, you're done for the day. Otherwise, good work. Get going. Start gluing, cutting, all that good stuff.